Good morning, welcome to Elevenses. It's show 407. It's Sunday, the 4th of February. I'm Kevin Williams of Survival Skills Rider Training, and I hope we're not going to go all stuttery today. For some reason, the CPU on my computer has just maxed out, and no reason it should be doing that. So let's hope it's not doing something ridiculous like installing updates in the background. That would be perfect. To try to avoid that happening, but sometimes computers have a mind of their own. Anyway, what have I got for you in the show today? Hoping that you can all hear me clearly and that we are running without any stuttering. We have a story about the son of an Israeli diplomat who's accused of deliberately running down a Florida cop. Ginger have suspended their e-scooter service in Great Yarmouth. The e-bike manufacturer Cake from Sweden has gone bankrupt, which is bad news. And also in Sweden, Regent e-bikes, they went bust, but they are now apparently reborn. In Argentina, the MotoGP round has already been axed just a couple of days into the second month of the year. And we'll have a quick look at Kove's 510X single-sided swinger adventure bike, which is apparently coming to Europe. And then finally, we'll have a look at a new car. Why a new car? Well, it's an EV. It's from Polestar, which is a subsidiary of Volvo, and it's coming without a rear windscreen. And I'll explain what I think are the disadvantages of this and hope that no further cars go that way. Anyway, that's what we've got in the show for you today. Don't forget, if you have anything you want to ask, any questions, do drop me a line. Always more than happy to answer what you have to say. Kevin says good morning. I will try to get back to you during the show. If I can't do it during the show, I will get back to you after the show, usually as soon as I can, occasionally a little bit later. Right, okay, so straight into the first element of the show, which is basically just to tell you about what's going on over the next few days. Now, don't forget, let's get that banner out of the way. Pictures frozen, so let's hope it's all going clearly at the other end. Right, don't forget there will be no 11s on Wednesday this coming week or on the following Sunday because I am taking a short break. I will be back on February the 14th, which is Valentine's Day. Now, secondly, the topic of the February live online event is all about how to use the free self-assessment chart that I gave away recently. If you haven't got a copy of that already, you can find it here. And if you head over, while you're over there, if you head over to the shop, you'll also find the download link to actually sign up for the show itself. It's also in the header details of this show, but just in case you can't find it easily, it's here. So that's the download for the self-assessment chart, and secondly the link to the talk, the live talk on actually how to use it. Don't forget the other older shows from this winter are also still online. Right, and the third thing to tell you about, some great news. Well, I hope it's great news anyway. I'm opening up the latest version of the Survival Skills e-course to pre-registrations later today. Now, well, first of all, you will get access straight to a free explainer page, which basically tells you what distance learning is all about. You'll be able to see what the contents of the e-course are. You'll get to understand how it operates, and there's a special bonus article too to encourage you to pop over and take a look at that. The course lasts, well, 8 modules. Hopefully they'll go out weekly to you. I'll get them ready weekly, certainly. If you can't manage to get through the module in a week, then it will be held over for a week for you. But basically 8 modules, enough to keep you busy for a week, and they involve a whole range of different activities. There will be some reading, of course, there will be some writing, but there'll be plenty of practical exercises that you can carry out and try on the road for yourself. carefully, of course. And there'll be regular Zoom meetings too. Now, this isn't my first experience of running online training. I previously delivered a successful online course, I think 12 years ago now. And the only reason I stopped running it was because the host service on which the course ran suddenly closed down. Now, it's always a risk, of course, with using somebody else to host your work. Anyway, I also offered an online course back in 2020 during the early part of the COVID epidemic, but to be honest, I'll be perfectly frank, I couldn't really replicate easily the structure of the original course on the new host. But the good news is recently an online learning site called Academy, which is UK based, which is good news too. They've recently changed their charging structure. So rather than ask for a hefty upfront contribution from me on a monthly basis, which always is a risky thing to take on, because if you don't get any sign-ups, I actually end up out of pocket. What they've done now is that they have made the courses chargeable via their marketplace. So they take a percentage of what the course costs, which I think is a much better idea. Anyway, particularly as I'll be unlikely to sell hundreds and hundreds of courses. So basically what it means to you is I can actually keep the cost down and make e-learning an affordable option for you. And to give you a sort of hint of how this will work, the e-learning course is currently set at £160 for the 8 modules, and it covers the same content as my 2-day on-road course, which currently costs £460 plus. So you're saving £300 by taking the course online. Anyway, rather than try to explain in any greater depth, I do encourage you, go and have a look at that intro page, test it out. And I'll get that notice up later today when the site goes live. So go and have a look at that, and I hope you will find something of interest there for you. Right, okay, moving rapidly on, we have the weather for bikers. Now, the best advice to you for the next few days is to keep checking your local weather forecast, because it is changeable. The weather is remaining mild for the moment for the time of year. Best temperatures obviously in the south, colder to the north and in Scotland. There'll be some bright intervals around again, often in the south. It's dry and reasonably bright here at the moment, but there will be cloud and rain around, and there are hints of colder weather to come, potentially with some snow for later in the week. But keep an eye on your forecast. As I say, at the moment it's all very changeable and nothing is writ in stone, despite what some of the trashier papers are telling us about walls of snow again. Right, and so on with the news for bikers. Why have I still got that picture up? That's not what you should have been seeing. You should have been seeing that image, of course. Anyway, a bit late for that now. So on with the rest of the news. Well, the first story I have for you comes from Florida, where the 19-year-old son of an Israeli diplomat has been charged with aggravated battery on a law enforcement officer and resisting an officer with violence following an incident in which he was accused of deliberately riding his motorcycle into the policeman. Now, the police lieutenant apparently signalled for Abraham Gill to stop on a road in Miami, but Gill reportedly intentionally ran him over, injuring his leg. Now, according to the Miami New Times, Gill told officers he was weaving through the vehicles because he hates queuing behind traffic. His father, Eli Gill, is the consul for administration at the Israeli consulate in Miami, and Gill's lawyer believes charges should be dropped on grounds of diplomatic immunity. I think that's something that we have heard here in the UK not too long ago. Now, a contrary legal opinion says that this only applies to the top tier of diplomats, not junior officials like consuls. Now, it seems Gill is actually no stranger to the Miami cops. They also released body cam footage showing a rider thought to be Gill evading a police stop just 2 weeks earlier, and it seems he was also pulled over on New Year's Eve for several traffic offences, and then he told the officer his father was an Israeli diplomat, which led to a call to his parents. And his bike has been found to have had a flip-up license plate, behind which a second plate carried the slogan, "Please chase." Right, so moving back to the UK and in fact to Great Yarmouth, and here Ginger, who are one of the e-scooter rental companies that are involved in the government's trial scheme, they are running these the e-rental scooters in Great Yarmouth in partnership with the Borough Council. The news is that they have pulled their service, they've suspended it. Now the company apparently announced the decision earlier this week via their app, and they've said that the suspension of the service is down to their quote growing frustration with the government's delays on making a decision on new rules for the personal mobility devices. And their message said the e-scooter service in Great Yarmouth is run on a trial basis with private investment while the government decides on how to legalise e-scooters and wider micro mobility. These trials were meant to last 1 year starting in 2020. The government has announced that they will require more than 6 years to decide, still providing no certainty for operators. We've tried all we can to provide continuity, but the indefinite delay is making it very difficult for operators, especially British operators like Ginger. And the message concludes by saying that the company is currently reviewing its operations and trying to find ways to come back into town, which kind of implies they probably run out of money. And I guess the Borough Council probably isn't prepared to back the scheme any further. Now, what is interesting though is that the data they have provided shows just how successful the trial has actually been in terms of usage. No less than 26%, that's 1 in 4 of the town's 18 to 29-year-olds have actually registered a Ginger account, and more than 250,000 miles have actually been ridden. That's enough to circle the earth 10 times, and that is an astonishing distance within a relatively small town like Great Yarmouth. So it does show that the e-scooter schemes can be successful, but it does make me wonder why the government are holding back for so long. I guess it's whether or not they want to legalise privately owned e-scooters. That'd be my guess. Anyway, moving on to another electric device, which sadly has not so good news. This is a Cake electric motorcycle. There's a Swedish brand, and the bad news is that they have filed for bankruptcy, and this is because recent efforts to secure what they describe as a bridging round of funding to tide them over basically until they can conduct a larger funding round later this year have been unsuccessful. Now, for the last few months, Cake have been facing difficulties in securing their extra cash, and the company's founder and CEO Stefan Itterborn, he said that the deal had been put on the table to save the company, but that potential investors had pulled out at the last moment. Now, Itterborn blames a number of circumstances that have caused Cake to run out of cash. He says that since there is a recession, climate issues are no longer in focus, and presumably what he's suggesting here is that people aren't looking at premium products like electric motorcycles, but in retrenching and purchasing cheaper petrol engine ones. But he says there are also problems with the venture capital ecosystem, and that quote, at the moment it is completely dead. There are no takers in the later phase that Cake is in. This is always one of the problems. It's scaling up. It's easy enough to build something in a workshop. It's easy enough to build small numbers by hand. The problem is scaling to large even modest scale production, a production line, finding equipment, finding the people to do the job, sourcing the raw materials that you need to put the bike together. That it's that scaling up which is the issue, and that's where the big money is needed. Now, Born, he says he's fully committed to finding a way to save Cake, saying I'm solely focused on a solution for the company no matter what format it may take. This remains true even in the case of potential bankruptcy. Now what that implies to me is that if the company does go bankrupt and the receiver, the Swedish version of the insolvency service over here, sells off the assets, then he is prepared to buy them back. Now, Cake was founded in 2015. They have around 140 employees. They've sold approximately 6,000 motorcycles. And as recently as 2021, Cake actually had a valuation set in the billions. I presume that's US dollars. That's what the currency is usually used for financial transactions, but it doesn't actually say in the report, so I'm not quite sure. It could be Swedish krona, presumably. Anyway, the company was apparently set to expand. They wanted to open stores in 8 major cities across 7 different markets. I believe I reported on that a couple of years ago, and at the moment they do have stores in Stockholm, Los Angeles, New York, Paris and Milan. Now, I'm no financial expert, I'll be perfectly upfront on this, but those figures don't look particularly well balanced. If you've only managed to sell an average of 600 motorcycles a year, I'm not sure where the justification is for opening stores in 5 different cities, not just any old cities, either sort of premium locations. And across 2 continents, that's a huge investment. And it sounds to me like an attempt to perform a long jump, really, before you can even crawl. Now, I can't help but think that Cake's premium price product, aimed at a very limited market, the cargo motorcycles you can see in the picture here, isn't also part of the problem. Now, I said back in an early lockdown version of Elevenses in 2020 that this bike here is the Ossa, which had just been released at the time. It reminds me of a sort of a cross between a Black & Decker Workmate and the folding mini bike that was designed for use by paratroops in World War II. Now, it does come with these sort of clever modular elements. You can see here it's got a front and rear rack. They bolt on, they bolt off. You can add the passenger seat if you want to, rather than the rear carrier. There are lots of things you can change. Cake claimed 1,000 different arrangements, although the most I could count was something over a dozen with the various parts on offer. So as well as carrying sort of tools, and as you can see, a couple of boxes here on the bike. Let me just zoom in and give you a slightly better view of it. The advertising really did show some pretty bizarre uses. Now, one photo had somebody actually making smoothies with a blender. Another featured a busker, and they're both using the battery to power their, the guitar and the amp and the blender itself. But they have had some success pitching the bike to game wardens in Africa. They're quiet, so they're perfect for patrolling and approaching poachers without being detected, and also for the transport of medical equipment. But frankly, that's a tiny market. If Cake have a real problem, then the second element is that they don't come cheap either. Their moped class Macca costs £4,400 last price, and this 55-mile-per-hour Ossa here, it's nearly £9,000, and that's before you add the bolt-on bits. I seem to remember that their price for the sort of like the wire carrier, the thing that looks a bit like a shopping basket on the front, I seem to remember that was on the wrong side of £200, so ferociously expensive for a bit of what really is bent wire. Anyway, I do have a bit of a soft spot for them because they're such a weird design, so I do hope that they manage to find the funding to recover from the setback. Right, anything I wanted to say, don't forget, if you are enjoying the show, it goes out Wednesdays and Sundays at 11, but don't forget, next Wednesday and next Sunday I am on holiday, so look for the show to reappear in a week and a half. Basically 14th of February is the next one. Right, okay, so another motorcycle to look at then. Here it is. Now this is another electric motorcycle startup, and another Swedish motorcycle startup too, which has slid into bankruptcy. And this is Regent Motorcycles, RGNT. I presume you're supposed to pronounce that Regent. They operate out of Kungsbacka, which is just south of Gothenburg. Now, they are another company who want to get urban commuters to swap to motorcycles, but they've done it in a slightly different way. They claim that they are driving innovation by combining, quote, timeless electric motorcycle design and advanced technology without compromising on the good stuff. I'm not quite sure how you have timeless electric motorcycle design, seeing as the electric motorcycles have only been around a few years. Yeah, I guess that what they really mean is the sort of picture there shows it's sort of classic, looks a bit like an old BSA or Triumph or something, if you ignore the big lump in the middle under the petrol tank. So they look more or less like motorcycles and not like a workbench with wheels. But unfortunately, Regent 2 failed to persuade enough buyers to part with cash. This particular machine, again, I'll just zoom in on it for you so you can see it a little bit more clearly. This is the #1 Classic SE. So it is a special edition. There is a cheaper non-SE one. But it's eye-wateringly expensive. It's almost £15,000. So it may be not be a great surprise to anyone to discover that Regent 2 have suffered a lack of cash flow and an inability to acquire enough resources to continue operating, said the statement. So the board declared the manufacturer bankrupt back in December. However, as is the way of these things, it's not all over. Jonathan Estrom, who founded the company back in 2019, has apparently taken back control of it, and he has formed a new company called Regent Reborn. So this new company has duly acquired the intellectual property, the tooling, and the remaining bits and parts. And the relaunched company is said to be in a streamlined format, which is an interesting term because again it hints at a company that may have been somewhat overweight in the first place. And he goes on to say, we will try to keep our pan-European dealer and service network fully intact and will be further expanded in the coming period. This way existing riders can continue to count on the service and support they expect from Regent while we welcome new riders to our brand in the meantime. With this move and restructuring, we have prepared Regent for an even more successful future. So bankruptcy is success. That's an interesting perspective. Right, okay, another organisation which isn't having a particularly good time of it at the moment is MotoGP. Now, more financial woes for the organisation just a month into 2024 because the organisers of the Argentinian leg of the racing championship have pulled the plug on their event already. Dorna have blamed the current economic and political factors in the country, saying that the local promoter of the event is unable to guarantee the services necessary for the Grand Prix to be held in 2024. So ticket sales have been halted. Those already purchased can be returned or they could be held over for the 2025 race, assuming of course that goes ahead. Now, in a joint statement with the Fédération Internationale de Motocyclisme, which is the FIM, of course, Dorna said this event will not be replaced on the 2024 calendar, which already features 21 races, which is a pretty big number actually. But they did say that MotoGP hopes to return to the Termas de Rio Hondo in 2025. Their finger is also pointed at a lack of government support. Now, the Argentine Grand Prix, it would have celebrated 10 years since its appearance on the World Motorcycling calendar this season, has previously received significant public aid, but an election last year resulted in a new government and they have reduced public spending since taking office, and it appears their support for the MotoGP event is one that has been cut. But it does rather beg the question, doesn't it? Why should a money pit like MotoGP expect handouts from the government? Right, so finally we get to see a motorcycle, and here it is. This is another bike that's coming from Europe, to Europe rather, from China. It's the Kove 510X, an adventure bike, as you can see. It's another offering which slips neatly into the A2 middleweight. Well, I call them middleweights. I don't think an 800cc bike putting out 100 horsepower is a middleweight, as some people seem to think. The middleweight sector that was previously dominated by Honda's CB500X. It's the influx of models into this segment that's possibly why Honda have actually rebranded their their bikes. Anyway, it's aimed at riders obviously who don't have a license for a bigger machine, or maybe don't see the need for the cubes, the power, the additional weight, or the additional fuel consumption. But anyway, the latest Chinese machine offers the adventure styling at something of a budget price. Now, the 510X is powered, let me zoom in on it a bit, give you a slightly clearer view. There it is. It's powered by a 498cc 8-valve parallel twin liquid cooled motor. It's bang on the A2 35 kilowatt limit, so that comes in at 8,500, so it's not a particularly high rever either. Maximum torque is 43 newton meters. That's at a fairly lowly 7,500 RPM, and it's said to push the bike to a maximum speed of 170 kph. I'll leave you to work out what that is in miles per hour. And Kove promise a flat torque curve being delivered by the 6-speed gearbox. I always wonder why you need 6 speeds when you've got a flat torque curve. Anyway, the machine gets the sort of fairly standard wheel setup. It's a 110/80/19 at the front and a 150/70/17 at the rear. Both are spoked, and they appear to be spoked to the edge of the rim, which presumably implies that tubeless tyres can be fitted. Now, the website is slightly confusing because it does talk about a luxury version of the bike, but I could only see one model. So I'm presuming it's this one here. It comes with KYB suspension at either end, and they are both preload and damping adjustable, which is quite a step at this price point. You get twin Nissin discs up front. I think the caliper at the back is probably unbranded, but Metzler tyres on the wheels. Now, both models get this tool. If there are two models, then they get this tool screen. The bike's fitted with LED lights all round. Instrumentation is the now standard digital TFT screen with all the usual information readouts. I don't know about electronic aids. There was nothing in the press release about whether or not it has traction control and rider aids, but it must of course come with ABS to suit UK and EU legislation. 20-litre petrol tank, split level seat there you can see. Kove claims a ready to roll curb weight of just 205 kilos. Now, one report said it's heavy. Frankly, 451 pounds by current standards is actually pretty light, particularly as the bike already comes pre-fitted with a reasonable sized rack on the rear and engine protector bars at the front. And there's also what looks like an aluminium bash plate under the engine too. Now, one feature that has been left out by most online reports is that the rear swing arm seems to be single-sided, and I believe that's unique in its class. How much? Well, it's significantly cheaper than the main rivals. It's €6,990, listed on the European website, and that's a smidge under £6,000 at current exchange rates. So let's hope it arrives at that kind of price in the UK. Right, okay. So anything else I just wanted to say before I move on to the new item? Don't forget, if you enjoy these shows and you want a truly new approach to learning riding, then you can check out my paperback books. They're over on my lulu.com/spotlight/survival skills website. And new as well is my e-learning course. I will drop that into the conversation again. Look out for an announcement later today. We are on this Sunday the 4th of February, so watch out later today on my Facebook page and my coffee page for a further announcement. All right, okay, so let's move on and look at a new car. Now, you may be wondering why I'm talking about a car in a motorcycle show, but here's the reason why. Do you notice anything a bit unusual about that vehicle? Well, you should, because what it has is no rear windscreen. Now, just to set the who's who correctly, the car is being made by a company called Polestar. They are a Swedish EV manufacturer. They are part owned by Volvo. Volvo own just under 50% of the company. Volvo themselves are owned by Zhejiang Geely Holding Group, and Polestar produces cars in several countries, including China, the US, and South Korea. in facilities owned by Volvo and Geely. Now, Polestar appear to have recruited motoring journalist Quentin Wilson to talk up this new vehicle. And Wilson starts by saying that Volvo have done a really clever thing and got rid of the rear window completely and given us this new rear window on the world. Now, what he's referring to there is a wide arc high definition camera, and he claims that since the car's been released, it was came out in China in December, he said there have been no discouraging words. Well, let me put that right and add a few. I would say personally, having thought about this, that the inability to see the driver is actually a significant issue for following vehicles, whether they're operated by another driver on 4 or more wheels, or whether on 2 wheels like us on our motorcycle. And I'll explain particularly why I think it's a problem with motorcyclists. I know that we already follow vans with solid rear doors. I used to own one myself, and we also have trucks and buses, of course, which have limited rear vision, and drivers have to rely on other ways of seeing what's behind them. But why do we need to see through the windscreen? Well, basically, we can actually pick up a lot of useful cues, I think, by watching where the driver is actually looking, particularly on multi-lane roads when a driver might be about to swap lanes, particularly on roundabouts where, again, a driver might be about to take an exit or move across the lane unexpectedly, and particularly when we on our motorcycle are doing something like planning an overtake. Now, glass is two-way even when it's tinted, so it's usually possible to see what the driver in the front seat is actually up to. You can see, for example, whether the driver is actually checking the mirror and looking around, so whether they're alert to traffic around them or whether they're just staring fixedly in front of them, which generally gives us a clue that they're probably not all that aware. Now, just because drivers looked in the mirror, we know that doesn't mean they've necessarily seen us, but what we do know is if they're not looking in the mirror, then they're probably not that aware of their environment. And that's useful knowledge, I would say. Take away the rear windscreen, you take away those clues. Now, Wilson determinedly talks up the benefit from the driver's perspective, which is why I suspect he's been paid to do this article. He says you can see more than you would through that grimy rear window. Now, I don't know when the last time you drove a vehicle without a rear windscreen washer might have been, but for me, I think it was about 2002, so more than 20 years ago. And that particular van was more than 10 years old at the time. It's a legal requirement that you have operating windscreen wipers. So if the back one is fitted, it must work. So you should be topping it up with fluid and things. Okay, you've got to top it up. I appreciate that. You've got to change the blade occasionally, but it doesn't mean that your windscreens necessarily stay grimy. Now, I don't know if the camera itself gets a washer for the lens, but it doesn't take a lot of effort on YouTube to find numerous reports of rear view camera failures on BMW, Range Rover, Ford, Jaguar, Mercedes, Toyota, and of course our old friend Tesla. Now, Tesla, just last week, they issued a recall for nearly 200,000 Model S, Model X and Model Y vehicles built from 2023 to fix what they described as a software instability. Now, apparently this prevents the rear view camera from, quote, working properly. What that means, I have no idea. But anyway, they're getting an over-the-air software fix for this. But many of the other failures are actually hardware problems. You can't fix those, of course, with a software update. You actually have to go in, check the camera, follow the wiring to the screen where it's all being displayed, and follow it through any clever bits of equipment that allow you to do things like change the view. Now, I'd be interested to know how many MOT failures are actually down to failures of the rear view camera system. The thing is, one of the things I like is simple technology that works, and you cannot argue that a reflective mirrors They simply do not go wrong. The only time I've ever had a problem with an internal mirror is one did actually fall off the windscreen on a very hot day, but I picked it up off the floor, and a few minutes later I refitted it with some new glue, and that was still there when the van was scrapped. So there are times when simplicity simply works. I think we get carried away sometimes with the benefits, the alleged benefits anyway, of clever solutions to simple problems. Now, why take the window out though? Now, Wilson says that the missing window offers more headroom, but look at the picture and look at the diagram. Does that look like a car with a lot of rear headroom? I honestly don't think so. So it sounds like a spurious reason to me. My guess is that it's easier and cheaper to construct the rear part of the passenger cabin to modern safety standards if you don't cut a hole in it for a piece of glass to go in. Wilson says it's bold, it's challenging, that's what we need in car design. And he says that Polestar themselves say the new design will give motorists a unique experience. Well, really? You can get the same experience sat in the back of a van. If you're wondering why I'm wound up about the loss of mirrors, tune in 2 weeks' time for the next Sunday show, because what I'm going to be looking at then is the electronic driver aids and looking at the evidence which suggests that these crash prevention systems still don't detect motorcycles reliably. So that is it for today. Don't forget, no shows next week. Back on Wednesday the 14th, and don't forget the live online talk event. That's Monday, February the 19th at 8 p.m. Self-assessment and how to use that free chart I gave you earlier. We also have a shout out to this week's coffee supporters and subscribers, Kevin and Dave, who's a new subscriber, Helen, Ian, Kevin, Brian and Anonymous. Thank you mightily for your support. Finally, if you've enjoyed the show, why not drop me a coffee? If you do it during the show, you actually get to see your name pop up in lights. If you don't, you get your shout out in the next show. And of course, if you do subscribe or support me over on Coffee, you get access to a month for the Survival Skills Archive, where there are over 1,000 better biking articles, which has to be the biggest resource of better biking information anywhere on the web. And that is it for today. Keep an eye on that forecast. As I said, there is the hint of some cold and icy weather coming midweek, and I won't be here on Wednesday to tell you about it, so watch out for that. But in the meantime, if you are out there on your bike today, do stay shiny side up.